During the 16th century in Istanbul, Ottoman Empire, the imperial harem hid women whose lives depended on the sultan's favor. One woman hears guards outside her chamber, keys turning in the lock, while a rival's accusation may have sealed her fate. That was the terrifying reality behind Hürrem Sultan's rise. She entered the Ottoman palace as a slave. She had no royal blood, no powerful family, and no legal claim to anything. Yet she eventually became the legal wife of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, and one of the most influential women in Ottoman history. And that meant defeating, outmaneuvering, or simply surviving other women who had once occupied the same dangerous world. Because the harem wasn't a romantic bedroom hidden behind palace walls. It was a hierarchy built around slavery, reproduction, loyalty, and access to the ruler. A woman who fell from favor could lose everything. A woman who gave birth to a prince could gain enormous status. And a woman whose son became a threat to the sultan could watch her entire family disappear. Yeah, this was not exactly a healthy workplace. Hurrem was probably born in Ruthenia, in the region associated with modern Ukraine, sometime around the beginning of the 16th century. Her original name is uncertain. European sources later called her Roxelana, while Ottoman sources knew her as Hurrem, meaning roughly joyful or cheerful. At some point, she was taken into the slave trade and eventually entered the Ottoman imperial harem in Istanbul. There, she entered a world where women were trained, ranked, supervised, and controlled. She learned Turkish. She learned palace etiquette. She learned how to behave around people who could destroy her future with a single decision. And then she caught Suleiman's attention. That was the first victory. But it was also the beginning of the real war. Because Suleiman already had an important woman in his life, Mahidevran Sultan. Mahidevran was the mother of Prince Mustafa, Suleiman's eldest surviving son and one of the most promising princes of the dynasty. Mustafa had almost everything a future sultan could want. He was experienced, he was popular with soldiers, he had royal blood, and most importantly, he already had a powerful mother protecting his interests. Then Hurrem arrived. Instead of remaining one favorite among many, she became Suleiman's constant companion. And unlike many palace women, she didn't simply disappear from his life after producing a male heir. She stayed near him. That was a massive change. In the Ottoman dynastic system, a prince's mother traditionally became closely tied to her son's future. When princes were sent away to govern provinces, their mothers often went with them. Hurrem broke that pattern. She remained in Istanbul. She remained close to Suleiman. And she gave birth to several children. Suddenly, Mahidevran wasn't simply the mother of the sultan's eldest son. She had become the mother of a rival branch of the dynasty. Imagine being Mahidevran. You already have the strongest candidate for the throne. Then another woman arrives with nothing. And somehow, she becomes the sultan's wife. That had to be terrifying. Hurrem's rise was even more extraordinary because Suleiman eventually freed her and married her. That marriage shocked the political world. Ottoman sultans generally avoided conventional marriages because slave concubines created fewer external family obligations. A formal wife could bring another dynasty, another political faction, another source of pressure. Hurrem brought none of that. She had begun as a slave. Now she was the sultan's legal wife, and the woman who had once occupied a subordinate position was suddenly standing above women who had spent years navigating palace politics. The humiliation for her rivals must have been brutal. But Hurrem didn't win simply because Suleiman found her attractive. Her real advantage was access. When Suleiman left Istanbul for military campaigns, Hurrem remained connected to the political heart of the empire. They exchanged letters. She could tell him what was happening in the capital. She could communicate concerns, information, and personal feelings directly to the sultan. That sounds harmless. It wasn't. In a monarchy where access to the ruler meant access to power, a private letter could matter more than a room full of officials. And Hurrem understood that. She didn't need to sit on the throne. She needed the man sitting on it to trust her. Meanwhile, Mahidevran's position became increasingly dangerous. Her son Mustafa remained enormously popular, and that popularity was exactly what made him dangerous. Ottoman succession was not a peaceful family business. There was no guarantee that the eldest son would simply inherit the throne. Princes could compete. Their supporters could form factions, and a prince who became too powerful could look like a future rebel, even if he had not actually rebelled. This was the ugly logic of the dynasty. The Sultan wanted an heir, but he also had to fear his heirs, and that fear eventually consumed Mustafa. Before that happened, however, another man fell. Ibrahim Pasha had risen from slave origins to become Suleiman's Grand Vizier and one of the most powerful men in the empire. He was close to the Sultan, extremely close, and in a palace where everyone watched everyone else, that kind of closeness could become dangerous. In 1536, Suleiman ordered Ibrahim executed. Later stories repeatedly blamed Hurrem. The image is irresistible. The ambitious wife whispers into the Sultan's ear, destroys his closest advisor, and removes another obstacle from her path. But history is messier. There is no solid evidence that Hurrem personally ordered Ibrahim's death. Suleiman himself made the decision. Still, Hurrem's enemies had found their villain, and then came the accusation that would define her reputation forever. Prince Mustafa. Mustafa was not some insignificant prince hiding in a corner. He was admired. Soldiers supported him. Many people believed he had the qualities of a future sultan, and Hurrem's sons were competing for the same future. In 1553, during a military campaign, Suleiman ordered Mustafa executed. The scene was horrifying. Mustafa entered his father's tent expecting to meet the Sultan. Instead, men seized him. He struggled. He was strangled, and his father allowed it to happen. Jesus. Imagine the psychological horror of realizing, in those final moments, that the man ordering your death was your own father. After Mustafa's execution, Hurrem's reputation became even darker. Her enemies accused her of plotting against him to protect her own sons. But again, the evidence does not prove that Hurrem personally engineered Mustafa's death. Suleiman made the final decision, and Ottoman succession itself was already brutally dangerous. Still, the story stuck. Why? Because people wanted a simple explanation. A powerful man killed his own son because of dynastic fear. That was complicated. A jealous woman destroyed her rival? Much easier. And so Hurrem became the perfect villain. The seductive foreign slave. The manipulator. The woman who supposedly controlled the Sultan. But there was another side to her power. Hurrem invested heavily in charitable foundations. She supported mosques, schools, baths, and soup kitchens. Her charitable complex in Istanbul became one of the visible monuments of her influence. In Jerusalem, her charitable foundation supported a soup kitchen that fed the poor. That matters because Hurrem wasn't only building influence inside the palace. She was building a public legacy outside it. She understood something important. Power disappears. Buildings remain. Names carved into foundations can survive for centuries, and her name did. But Hurrem's victory came with a terrible price. Her sons did not simply live happily ever after. Prince Mehmed, one of her most promising sons, died young. Another son, Cihangir, suffered from serious physical problems and died relatively young as well. Her surviving sons Selim and Bayezid eventually became rivals, and Bayezid's story became another brutal chapter in the dynasty. Bayezid rebelled against his father's authority and fought against Selim's faction. Eventually, Suleiman turned against him. Bayezid and his sons were executed in 1561. Hurrem had spent her life trying to secure her children's position, but she could not protect all of them. That is the cruelest irony of her story. She mastered the palace. She mastered the politics. She became the Sultan's wife. She transformed the role of royal women, and still, the dynasty she had learned to manipulate remained stronger than any mother. Hurrem died in 1558, several years before Bayezid's final downfall. She never saw how the struggle between her sons ended. She never saw Selim become sultan. She died with her reputation already divided between admiration and hatred. To some, she was a brilliant political operator who broke through a system designed to control women. To others, she was the dangerous woman who destroyed rivals and corrupted the Sultan. The truth is probably less dramatic and more disturbing. Hurrem didn't create the Ottoman system. She was created by it. She was purchased as a slave. She was placed inside a palace where her future depended on other people. She learned the rules. Then she learned where those rules could bend. And eventually, she became powerful enough to bend them herself. That is what made her different from the Sultan's other women. Mahidevran had a prince. Hurrem had access. Other women could give the Sultan children. Hurrem turned intimacy into political influence. Other women could disappear from the center of power. Hurrem refused to disappear. And that may be the darkest lesson of all. In the Ottoman Harem, survival didn't necessarily belong to the nicest woman. It belonged to the woman who understood the system fastest. Hurrem entered the palace without a throne, without a family name, and without control over her own life. Years later, she was buried beside Suleiman's great mosque complex in Istanbul, surrounded by monuments of the empire she had helped shape. The slave girl had become the Sultan's wife. Her rivals had fallen. Her enemies had whispered. Her sons had fought. And the palace had swallowed almost everyone who entered it. But Hurrem left something behind. Not just a tomb, not just buildings. A warning, because in that palace, the most dangerous woman wasn't always the one carrying a weapon. Sometimes she was the woman who could make the Sultan listen, and once the Sultan listened, someone else was usually about to lose everything.